And a lot of you seem to be doing okay from your posting. So I began to get used to all this unusual stuff. And I was pleased reading them. I always enjoyed reading them. And the burning question, one of them I liked is since the focus of Buddhism is on discovery through education instead of didactic teaching that are central to most major religions, is it possible to be a Buddhist while also believing in and practicing another religion? Well, usually it isn't possible. The way world religions have been, it's not possible to be two at once. From both sides, they all don't want people to do two different things. And so traditionally, that's not the case. What makes one a Buddhist, the criterion of becoming a Buddhist, traditionally, in Buddhist countries, is that you take refuge. It's called taking refuge in the three jewels. And the three jewels are Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, which, as you know, mean the teacher, the teaching, and the community that try to put the teaching into practice, and all three of those are defined in a variety of ways, in different schools and different times by different people. But basically what taking refuge means is that one decides that one's sort of ultimate destiny will be decided by whatever one learns from that teacher and that teaching and that community. And then remember, as I said, there's like this two-pronged thing in Buddhism where the monastics, or the mendicants initially, and then eventually you can say monastics, they're the ones who are putting it into practice as an education, primarily. And they're like the professionals. And for them, it's more of an education, and the Buddhist teachings are more like scientific teaching, in that they are describing reality and providing methods for people to come to an understanding of reality, which people are supposed to put into practice. And among those methods, belief, and especially unreasonable belief is considered not helpful, because that's a kind of locking the mind into a certain thing and then not inquiring further. And also, if it's not supported by common sense or reason, it's weak, in the sense that you believe it because you're born in a tradition or someone orders you to or whatever. But if you don't have a reason, someone else could order you to be something else, and you could live somewhere else where there's another tradition. In other words, it doesn't have a reasonable grounding. And animals and human beings are just generally reasonable in the Buddhist view. You know, the snail pokes its head out, before crossing the road or coming out of the grass or wherever it might be, make sure that there's no Frenchman running around with a bag to pack up the snail. And then if they don't see one, then they reason that there isn't one, and they go out and they snail their way across. So all animals are practical in the sense that they're trying to survive, ameliorate their existence, avoid dangers, and so on. So to believe something that's completely unreasonable, like a snail that would crawl out after looking to see if there's a Frenchman there, and then sees the Frenchman, and then crawls toward the Frenchman. A hungry Frenchman. And that would be an unreasonable snail. So that's not considered helpful by Buddha. Blind faith is definitely not considered helpful. And I'll refrain from telling you my favorite joke. Theologian's joke that I was told by, I think I will, and yes I will, too early, by one Chicago famous theologian about faith, definition of faith. But I'll come back to it another time. I want to look at some of the suttas that we want to look at. And in reading these suttas, sutra in Sanskrit, or sutta, I don't think they're different words. They don't like the consonant clusters, the Pali, because it's a colloquial language, so they don't say sutra, they say sutta. And you sort of enter into a flavor of the world in which the Buddha did his teaching, he came to his achievement, he did his revolution actually, in leaving his social duties, social caste, and set there for an example which happened to a lot of people in India over the subsequent centuries, So much so that probably a very major theme in the Gita, Bhagavad Gita, a very important document in Hinduism, one of its major themes is getting a young warrior prince who's on the threshold of a battle, not to get out of his chariot and say, forget about the battle, I want to do nonviolence, I don't want to kill my cousins, I don't want to kill these people, my teacher, because on the other side berates a bunch of people that he was familiar with. And God, in that case it's Krishna, spends a lot of effort to explain to him why he has to do his duty as a warrior and why he should not drop out and become a seeker of truth and a follower of nonviolence, because that would be against his caste duty, his dharma in that sense, as a warrior. If you're familiar with the Bhagavad Gita. And that, the finished form of the Bhagavad Gita that we now know is said to have been elaborated about 600-700 years after the time of Buddha. So that was at a time when India was throwing off a long-term foreign occupier who were a very early version of the Tajiks, probably, who were known as the Kushans, and who had an empire stretching from north of Afghanistan all down through central India, but then became Buddhists once they were ruling India, because Buddhism was they were big patrons of Buddhism, but they were foreigners. So when the Indians were trying to fight them off and wanted to draft people into their army, the Gita became a major document for that. And, fight Arjuna type of thing, they say. And so Gandhi had to go through conniptions to reinterpret that teaching of Hinduism about do your task duty and fight your battle in order to interpret in terms of non-violence, because the Gita is lodged within the Mahabharata, which was a very violent, chronicles a very violent war. And it encourages the war to happen by pushing the prince into it, in fact. So anyway, that's what is fun about reading them. When I read the suttas, I always feel you feel the atmosphere of the thing. Now, scholars can take apart things, and they try to. One of the things scholars try to do in studying Buddhism is, they feel a great deal has been accomplished if they figure out the year in which this happened or that happened, and then they study texts with a view to which one came first and who did it. They don't really follow the idea that these are records carried in memory for centuries and then written down in various languages, and therefore what you're reading there is some sort of a real record of what happened. And if there's something they don't like in a sutra, they say that, well, that was added by some later monks. And if something they like, they say that was put in by Buddha. But actually, nobody really knows in any way. And of course, that is a good thing to do, to look at these things critically and see where things have been warped or changed in later circumstances, if you can do it. India is particularly notoriously difficult to do that in, because they didn't print, and they hand wrote everything when they finally did write it down. And then in the climate of India, the palm leaf manuscripts that they wrote are not well preserved, and therefore every few generations they have to recopy them. And often copy is, the idea of the sort of expertise of memory remained a cultural motif in the whole tradition, right up into, for example, in modern Tibet, before it was changed by the intrusion of the Chinese military. When they were doing their own thing, the high scholars never wrote down anything. They didn't know how to spell, actually, but they had memorized everything, and they could recite hundreds and hundreds of pages. And some of the sharper ones could even correct a misspelling, so they kind of had a picture in their mind of what it looked like as a spelling, but they didn't know like the technique of spelling and things like that, because they didn't write. They taught orally. Some of them who wrote books, they spoke, and then someone else wrote it down. And therefore, the role of the scribe, the writer, and in Nepal in the 19th, 20th century, or 18th century, that was also the case. So the role of the scribe was not the high scholarly role. It was like a mechanical kind of function, like a secretarial function, something like that. And the idea of having this memory. And the Tibetans who came out in exile to India, they have an interesting thing. They say that their memories got duller in India, and they attribute it to the presence of electrification in the countryside. Isn't that interesting? I mean, who can really measure that? But they claim that like humming wires and electricity and wires, it sort of dulls, I don't know, like parts of the neurons in the brain. I wonder if anybody would do a study of that. And so their memory is decreased in power. On the other hand, I think that the Vedist Brahmins, even in the modern time, although many villages in India are not very well electrified, but they do have extraordinary also memory things. And that's considered a big thing to have memory things. It's very alien to us. Who was it recently? I met someone and they were studying, oh yeah, one of my Sanskrit students, one of my advanced graduate students. They were forced by their teacher in Nepal, they were there on a summer fellowship, and they were forced to memorize 200 verses of Kalidasa's poem, one of his poems. And we had it recited in class. It was very, that I just went roaring through it. And I was very pleased with himself, but he said he was really freaked out having to do it because he's a graduate student here, but he has excellent grades, but had never used memorization much, in their education, and we don't, I think. How many of you have ever memorized rather, a kind of like a Shakespeare play or something? Maybe you're an actor. Are you an actor?
No.
Like a long part, like Hamlet part or something?
Back at school in Jerusalem, we used to memorize a lot of texts.
I see. So it's an odd thing for us to have to do. But apparently it's quite good. You have something called the hippocampus. And your hippocampus, the storage area increases in your, you can't call it a hard disk, I guess I call it I either call it a slime disk or a wet disk, depending on my mood, the brain. And it increases. And London taxi drivers have extraordinary memory. Of course, the traditional one. And because they have to memorize all the map of London, all the little alleys and everything. And so they have a huge hippocampus. There's a neuroscientist that discovered. And one former student of mine, who subsequent to having his PhD here in religious studies, Sanskrit and so on, he went and got a neuroscience PhD, and then he went and measured Vedic Brahmins, and they are neck and neck with the London taxi driver. As far as size of the hippocampus. Which is kind of exciting. It's funny. Okay, so here we have this pride humble. And I'd like to read this one, and I cited it, because it shows that Buddha is not always Mr. Nice Guy in the things. He's not always sweet and nice. He's rather rough to this Ambata, who is kind of rude to him. And then he was, first he scolded him. And then Ambata refers to the Buddha as a shaven little ascetic, a menial, a black scouring from Brahma's foot. With them it is fitting to speak just as I do with Reverend Gautama. So, in other words, it says reverend, so he's formally as being something. But then he refers to him as the shaveling of the feet of God. He's not a Brahmin, and he's not a Brahmin. Buddha was not a Brahmin to start with. There are Brahmin ascetics, but once they become ascetics, according to this guy, they are very lowly. So he's not going to be respectful to them. Then Buddha rejects that. Says, but you came here seeking something. Whatever it was you came for, you should listen attentively to hear about it, Ambata. You have not perfected your training. Your conceit of being trained is due to nothing but inexperience. So then he gets very mad. He's a crack student of his own Brahmin teacher. So then he comes back, and and he talks about the castes, Reverend Gautama, there are 4 castes. The classes really, it's a class, same as class, but caste, but it just means you're born into it, and it's not a matter of economic level or anything, you're born into it. You can't get away from it, supposedly. The Kshatriyas, the Brahmins, the merchants, those are the warriors, the priests, or intellectuals, the merchants, and the artisans. And then there's an outcast kind of group that are the workers, actually, in this case. And of these 4 castes, 3, the Kshatriyas, the merchants, and the artisans are entirely, it's not even including the mass of the people who are non-caste people. And also there's a race thing about it too. They're called dark and so forth. So that's already like the US is like following an ancient tradition. and a bad tradition. And with regard, so they are tireless, subservient to the Brahmins. With regard to this, it is not proper that they should not pay homage to the Brahmins. So then he accused the Sakyans of being menials. So then he says to Ambata, he gives him this story. Ambata, in former days, according to those who remember the ancestral lineage, the Sakyans were the masters, and you are descended from a slave girl of the Sakyans. And somehow the Brahmin doesn't challenge Buddha's, like, either you can call it clairvoyance or some kind of almost extrasensory perception to know his lineage like this. Which shows that in that culture, these kind of mental abilities are considered normal, not miraculous or supernatural or something. For the Sakyans regarded King Okaka, with Pali Ikshvaku in Sanskrit, as their ancestor. At one time, King Okaka, to whom his queen was dear and beloved, wishing to transfer the kingdom to her son, banished his elder brother from the kingdom. And he gives the names of these people. And these, being banished, made their home on the flank of the Himalayas beside a lotus pond where there was a big grove of teak trees. And for fear of contaminating the stock, they cohabitated with their own sisters. Then King Okaka asked his ministers and counselors, where are the princes living now? And they told him. And then he said, they are strong as teak, Saka, from which the name Shaka, or Shakya comes. These princes, they are real Sakyans. Sanskrit would be Shakyans. And that is how the Sakyans got their well-known name. And the king was the ancestor of the Sakyans. Now, King Okaka had a slave girl called Disa, who gave birth to a black child. The black thing, when it was born, exclaimed, wash me, mother, bathe me, mother, deliver me from this dirt, and I will bring you profit. Because Ambata, just as people today use the term hobgoblin, I don't know about that translation from Pishacha. Pishacha means something like a savage or a native, as a term of abuse. So not necessarily common. So in those days they said black. And they said as soon as he was born, he's born of kanha, a savage. And that is how in former days the Sakyans were the masters, and you are descended from a slave girl of the Sakyans. On hearing this, the young men said, Reverend Gautama, do not humiliate Ambata too much with talk of his being descended from a slave girl. Ambata is well born, of good family, he's very learned, he's well spoken, a scholar, well able to hold his own in this discussion with the Reverend Gautama. Then the Lord said to the young man, those young men who were other Brahmins, he said, if you consider that Ambata is ill-born and not of a good family, unlearned, ill-spoken, no scholar, unable to hold his own in this discussion with the ascetic Gautama, then let Ambata be silent and you conduct this discussion with me. In other words, shut up and let me talk to Ambata. Ambata. In other words, if you think he can't hold his own, then keep talking to me. Otherwise, be quiet and let me talk to Ambata. That's a little harsh, what you said. I think so. But if you think he is able to hold his own, then you be quiet and let him discuss with me. So we'll be quiet, they say. They repeat that, of course, and then they say we'll be quiet. And then the Lord said to Ambata, that's one thing you notice about India even today. People love to talk. So they don't mind repeating the whole sentence that you just said. And when I remember years ago when I first went to India, more than 50 years ago, and so walking down the street and someone talking to somebody, and somebody talking off the second floor balcony to somebody else, and it was I was wondering if they were having a fight or something, because they speak very vigorously. The Hindi language, which is connected to Sanskrit and Pali, very similar. They have a way of speaking more forcefully than we do. The way they pronounce things, you know, the explosiveness of the consonants and the volume and everything, and they enjoy speaking in a strong way. A little bit more than we Anglo kind of culture does. So that's the case here. So he uses ... you know, to avoid having to write the whole paragraph over again. Okay, then the Lord said to Ambata, Ambata, I have a fundamental question for you which you will not like to answer. If you don't answer or evade the issue, if you keep silent or go away, your head will split into 7 pieces. And that's a Vedist cultural phrase, meaning becoming really embarrassed at losing it, you know, in a debate, and to have being silenced or having no recourse and so on. And I don't think anybody's head actually split, but it feels like that, apparently, and they talk like that. What do you think about that? Have you heard from old and venerable Brahman, teacher of teachers, where the Kanhayans came from, or who was their ancestor? This Ambata remained silent. The Lord asked him the second time, again he remained silent. The Lord said finally, answer me now, Ambata, this is not a time for silence. Whoever Ambata does not answer a fundamental question put to him by a Tathagata, by the third asking, has his head split into 7 pieces. And at that moment, Vajirapani, the Yaka, and this is a goblin actually, but it's a friendly goblin, usually, but very fierce. That's Vajrapani. Holding a huge iron club. This is in Pali literature, this is sort of, like an elf or something, or a dwarf, or like a yaka means like a goblin. Holding a huge iron club, flaming, ablaze and glowing up in the sky just above Ambata. I was thinking, if this young man, Ambata, does not answer a proper question put to him by the blessed Lord, by the third time of asking, I'll split his head into 7 pieces. The Lord saw Vajrapani, and so did Ambata. And at the sight, Ambata was terrified and unnerved. His hair stood on end, and he sought protection, shelter, and safety from the Lord. Crouching down close to the Lord, he said, what did Reverend Gautama say? And the Reverend Gautama repeat what he said. But what do you think about that? Have you heard who was the ancestor of the Kanhayans? And then he answered, yes, I heard it just as the Reverend Gautama said. That is where the Kanhayans came from. He was their ancestor. Hearing this, the young men, the other Brahmins, made a loud noise and clamor. So, Ambata is ill-born, not of a good family, born of a slave girl of the Sakyans, and the Sakyans are Ambata's master. We disparaged the ascetic Gautama, thinking he was not speaking the truth. Then the Lord thought. So they turn on him, in other words. They're so into their class thing. It is too much the way these young men humiliate Ambata for being the son of a slave girl. The descendant of a slave girl, I think he should have said. I must get him out of this. So he said to the young men, don't disparage Ambata too much for being the son of a slave girl. That Kandha was a mighty sage. In other words, that supposedly low caste, wrong race person was a mighty sage. He went to the south country, learned the mantras of the Brahmins there, and went to King Okaka and asked for his daughter, Madarupi. And King Okaka, furiously angry, exclaimed, so this fellow, the son of a slave girl, wants my daughter, and put an arrow to his bow. But he was unable either to shoot the arrow or to withdraw it. Then the ministers and the counselors came to the sage Kandha and said, spare the king, reverend sir, spare the king. In other words, the reason he couldn't draw the blow, he became paralyzed, was the mind power of the sage Kandha. Who was even like a bit of a sorcerer, which they liked in this culture. So then the Kandha said, the king will be safe, but if he looses the arrow downward, the earth will quake as far as his kingdom extends. Reverend sir, spare the king, spare the land. The king of the land will be safe, but if he looses the arrow upward as far as his realm extends, the God will not let it rain for 7 years. Reverend sir, spare the king and the land, and may the God let it rain. He means by that the Narga, the dragon king. The king of the land will be safe, and the God will let it rain, but if the king points the arrow at the crown prince, the prince will be completely safe. I keep saying, oh, it's threatening. Then the ministers exclaimed, let King Okaka point the arrow at the crown prince, the prince will be perfectly safe. The king did so, and the prince was unharmed. But he's still paralyzed there with a strong blow. Then King Okaka, terrified and fearful of divine punishment, gave away his daughter Madarupi, which means Madarupi means whose beauty is intoxicating. So young men, do not disparage Ambata too much for being the son of a slave girl. That Kandha was a mighty sage. And the Lord said, Ambata, what do you think? Suppose a Kshatriya youth were to wed a Brahmin maiden, and there was the son of the union. Would that be the son of Kshatriya youth and a Brahmin maiden receive a seed and water from the Brahmins? He would, Reverend Gautama. Would they allow him to eat at funeral rites and rice offerings and sacrifices or as a guest? They would, Reverend Gautama. Would they teach him mantras or not? They would, Reverend Gautama. Would they keep their women covered or uncovered? Uncovered, Reverend Gautama. But will the Kshatriya sprinkle him with the Kshatriya consecration? No, Reverend Gautama. Why not? Because Reverend Gautama is not well born on his mother's side, because the mother was a Brahmin. Well born from the Kshatriya point of view. So what do you think about that? Suppose a Brahmin youth were to wed a Kshatriya maiden, and there was a son, but that son, and he goes on through the same thing. So in a way he shows that the warriors are actually superior to the Brahmins, socially speaking. He proves to that. So he proves that to him. So then he goes on and on, but he starts to talk about how the caste thing is just arbitrary. It's nothing absolute. And the Brahmins of this time believed that, you know, the mouth of Brahma, and since they were into speech, they like the mouth, brain, or the head of Brahma is the source of the Brahman. The arms of Brahma, of God, are the source of the warrior. The belly of God are the source of the merchants. And then the lower people come from the legs and the feet of God. That they had like an absolutized thing like that, and he's showing that it actually is not the case to him. And so, so he's showing that what makes you a good warrior class, ruler class that is you value the tribe or the clan or the family. He with knowledge and conduct is best of gods and men, so ethics are important. And Ambata likes that. And then he says, therefore, Ambata is not from the standpoint of the attainment of unexcelled knowledge and conduct. The reputation based on birth and clan is declared, nor on the conceit which says, you are worthy of me or you are not worthy of me. For wherever there is a giving and taking, or a giving and taking in marriage, there is always this talk and this conceit. But those who are enslaved by such things are far from the attainment of the unexcelled knowledge and conduct. That is to say, wisdom and ethics, which is attained by abandoning all such things. But what is this conduct? And then he goes on to say basically, and notice in this next paragraph on 119, how many verses are quoted from the second sutra. That's why if there's no one sutra that you remember well, the second one is so important. And it really gives the survey and the overview of the whole kind of teaching, and its paragraphs are considered like archetypal. And therefore quoted in lots of other sutras with the current. That's the tape that the Buddha would unravel when he was trying to explain what it was all about. And anyway, then he also said that those Brahmins who do rituals and who serve in the temples, and like him and his teacher, they are not as far out as the ascetics who learn to meditate and attain deep contemplations and achieve altered states and so forth. And you are from the lineage of those who failed to really master your minds and become truly enlightened, even in your own terms. And he compares favorably the ascetics, because remember he was saying a little shaman ascetic and a little lowly and whatever, so because they are not big rich Brahmins in a big rich temple. And he's rejecting that. He's saying that the ones who are riding around in the temple, you know, going to parties, having girls, riding around in chariots, you know, guarded by bodyguards and so forth. He says, therefore, so Ambata, neither you nor your teacher or a sage or one trained in the way of a sage. And now, as for your doubts and perplexities concerning me, we will clarify these by your asking me and by answering your questions. So he really gives him a hard time before he will then address him kind of philosophically. And then, oh yeah, that's right, that Ambata had been told by his teacher to look and see if Buddha had the extraordinary signs. And the extraordinary signs of a realized person are some of them really very weird. Like you have to, some yogis can do this today in America actually. You have to take your tongue and reach your hairline. When you spread it, it covers more or less your face. And so, you know, you can always check a guru in case you're a guru hunting. Just as if you stick out your tongue and see how far up you go. No, you go. Anyway, reach the tip of the nose, much less get up to the hairline. And another one, and then this other weird one is where the genitalia, male genitalia, are sheathed like a horse, you know, or a dog, you know, where they go into a sheath. That's another one. And apparently he let him know that. I don't know, he gave him a temporary transparency thing. And then there's earlobes, and there are all kinds of strange things about the sort of special signs of a person. So then he goes and reports that he has all the 32 signs of a great man. About Mahapurusha, a great being, a great soul, what's that? And so anyway, he deals with the teacher and so on. But the point is, this is revolutionary. Even today in India, there are many instances and many cases where like an untouchable or outcast person or a very low caste person wanders into a Brahmin village. Even they're poor people, they're not like wealthy people, but they're Brahmin. And somehow goes and is thirsty and takes water from the well. Then they go, no, they kill him. They can get killed. And there was a case where a bunch of low caste people went to Bodh Gaya when some famous Lama was there, and they asked to take refuge in Buddhism, which is one way of getting out of the caste system, no longer being a Hindu. And that's also one of the things used by Muslim and Christian missionaries, because they also get out of the caste system if they leave Hinduism. And then they did that, but then they were attacked by a neighboring Brahmin village, and their village destroyed, and many killed. Today, there's a hysterical thing, this thing about caste, which seems to have re-established itself very strongly, and probably, and was definitely the case in Buddha's time, and probably that kind of radical division between groups is a strategy of rulers. And Max Weber, the German sociologist, he was very, very, I have a sore earache today. He was very fond of someone called Kautilya, K-A-U, Kautilya, if anybody who's kind of interested in this, Kautilya, who wrote something called the Artha Shastra, Kautilya. And he was a Brahmin minister of an emperor about 200-300 years after Buddha's time. And he said that a king had to have a lot of spies and a lot of special agents to find out what was going on under him, you know, the people under him. And then also, and even he had to have his own special agents join the military academy for his generals, and then be a mole in that military academy. And then when he got up to the level of having his own army in the assemblage of armies, he then had to go to the other generals and propose a revolution, that they band together and overthrow the king. And then when he got anybody to agree with him, he was to come in and rat them out. So, for example, that was a spy technique. But then, the king should not, outside of execute those potential revolutionaries, he should consider them very capable generals, and he should assign them far away to the frontier posts. I mean, the social management thing is so sophisticated. And then, the other thing is they should send in somebody, when if they found out that in the building trades, that the carpenters were eating lunch with the bricklayers, they were to send in a carpenter who was to pretend to be a carpenter from another city. And then when he would sit down at first at that lunch, he would then get the other carpenters and he would say to them, what is wrong with you guys? Over there in Calcutta or Mumbai or whatever the ancient equivalent was, we would never eat lunch with the bricklayers. They're like a different, they're like lower, you know, they lay bricks, they work in like mud, you know, like, forget it, what is wrong with you? You don't know that carpenters are a higher caste than bricklayers. And then they stop having lunch together. And then that way they would not plot revolution. But revolution is better plotted at lunch, during our lunch break. Other people plot revolutions. And Max Weber said this that Machiavelli looked like lightweight, you know, ancient India. You know, so you have to understand the Buddha's thing and this whole revolution he's doing. It was in the context of a highly wealthy, highly stratified, very forcefully, rigidly stratified society. And one that repelled the Achaemenids, who constantly were conquering the Greeks, and I'll even spy we hear of Thermopylae and all that, but they were conquering all of Turkey and Mesopotamia and Egypt at the time. They were very powerful, the Persians, but they never managed to conquer India. So around Buddha's time, then later everybody's conquering India. That's why they got a little annoyed with Buddhism because they all became too much yogis, too many monks. Okay, so that's number 3. And to really appreciate, you have to really appreciate the intensity of the revolution is what I'm trying to show you. It was not an easy thing. And this relates to a thesis that I propound, you can read at more length, in the Inner Revolution book, which took me a long time to figure out. And I even became a monk for a while when I was young. And I still didn't figure this out, which was that the formation of a group of people, mendicants, who drop out of their caste duties and their roles in the caste, and then including women who are the more oppressed one, the oppressed group, and then go out and live there, and then come back like in that sutra, the second one. They used to wait hand and foot, they were the slave of that king, and then they come and he has to feed them. Because that guy who became a little holy, a little bit different by developing himself in a yogic way. And it's really amazing that it happened. And I had a kind of eureka moment where I thought of, you take some guy in like the 1830s at Harvard. He goes to Harvard somehow, which was formed in the 17th century. And then he gets a big idea about egalitarianism, and he reads The Rights of Man or something. And then he goes down south, and he's the son of a Georgia planter or something, and then he says, oh, I don't want to be a planter, and I want a space in the Central Park of Atlanta, and then I'm going to have mendicants who are going to come there, and we're all going to attain enlightenment. And then they can be slaves too, Well, maybe you have to let them go, and so, they can't break away and run away, but you have to let them go because it's a higher spiritual duty. And your spiritual duty, all my other fellow planters. And then we're all going to attain enlightenment, and you're going to feed us. Free lunch. In Atlanta in 1830. How do you think that would go? It all completely, destroyed. And yet in India, he did the equivalent. And it did mushroom into a huge group because those people were so oppressed, and a lot of the lower caste people joined. And gradually he they can't run away. If they owe a debt, they maybe have to try to raise money and pay the debt, and then they can come and be a mendicant. They have to have their parents' permission. Bit by bit, they added little things to make it less stressful within society. And that is the only reason that he hesitated to admit women. He certainly knew that his cousin and his foster mother and his ex-wife would prevail, and they would get to be nuns if they wanted to be. But he just kept hesitating, and he kept making it difficult for them. And then he added more things to make it seem a little less cushy, and lowered their status compared to the male monks, precisely to try to stem the tide, because they were so enslaved and oppressed that the idea that they go free would freak out the males who are losing their servants. And we're still seeing the glass ceiling, what they call the glass ceiling today in this country. Although they're also very advanced and all, but in those days it was very severe. So ancient Greece, the supposed discovered democracy, they had plenty of slaves and servants and plenty of caste things, and plenty of sexism of the male. Look at that stupid Agamemnon. Agamemnon sacrifices his daughter to get a favorable wind for his fleet to Troy. Kills his own daughter to get his fleet over to Troy. That's where we came from, this book. Now we're getting close, but we still have a few more on top of us. Okay, number 5. This is a fun one, because this is like a Confucian axial age strategy. That's what it does. It's just like Confucius, it's approximately the same time. Right? This Brahmin goes there, he's going to make a sacrifice. And that's your Vedic sacrifice. He's going to kill all these animals. 700 bulls, 700 bullocks, 700 heifers, 700 eagles, and 700 rams were tied up to the sacrificial posts. That means where they tie them and they slaughter them. Okay? So you are talking blood sacrifice. Note that this is not done by Hindus today, except in one small tiny cult, Kali, what they call the Kali cult. They're all vegetarians. They get upset about the Muslims being the butchers and having meat industry. But look, that's what the Vedic people were doing, is what I'm saying. So then he says, well, maybe Gautama will give you some good advice about having a successful sacrifice. And he has heard good things about him, and the other Brahmins say, oh, don't go. And he says, no, I want to go there. I want to get some advice. So then they didn't want to go. Don't visit him, they say. He's not proper. Oh, no, make Gautama come visit you. And now, why shouldn't I go? And then he goes, right? So then, once he gets there, well, Kudananda went with a large company of Brahmins to Ambalatika. He approached at the grove of Ambala. He approached he approached the Lord, exchanged courtesies with him, and sat down to one side, which is what you do then when you become a audience. Some of the Brahmins and householders of Kanamata made obeisance to the Lord, some exchanged courtesies with him, some saluted him and joined palm, some announced their name and clan, and some just went quietly and sat down. So sitting at one side, Kudananda addressed the Lord, Reverend Gautama, I have heard that you understand how to conduct successfully the triple sacrifice with its 16 requisites. Now I do not understand all this, but I want to make a big sacrifice. It would be well if you said Gautama were to explain this to me. And then Buddha says, listen, Brahmin, my prayer proposition I will explain. He says, yes, sir. The Lord says. And then he says, once upon a time, he talks about this king in ancient time, very wealthy, who did a huge bunch of, I'm just making it short, wanted to do a big sacrifice. And he recites someone else's advice, the chaplain's advice to the king. And he tells him what to do. He says, instead of dealing with robbers and brigands and terrible people by killing them, give them food. You completely eliminate that problem by giving them distributing grain and fodder, and to those in trade give capital, those in government service assign proper living wages. Then those people being intent on their own occupations will not harm the kingdom. That's pretty good and very Bernie Sanders type advice. And they will not harm the kingdom. Your Majesty's revenues will be great, the land will be tranquil and not beset by thieves, and people with joy in their hearts will play with their children and dwell in open houses. So he did that. Then he said, well, I've gotten there, that was good advice. Now, I want to make another great sacrifice, but how can I do that for lasting benefit and happiness? And then, get all the warriors, the ruler class and the Brahmin class, and have them all come, the wealthy merchants, and say to them, I wish to do that and have them help you. And he did so, and then he got ready for it. So then what he did was he basically made a vegetarian sacrifice, is what I'm saying. He sacrificed all kinds of things. And he teaches ethics in the process of it. Not to kill people, not to steal their stuff, not to commit sexual abuse, not to lie, etc. All these ethical things that they have. Very much like they have something called tenfold path of evolutionary action, good and bad, two sets of them. And they're very similar. 7 out of 10 are like the 10 commandments, Mosaic commandments. But they're not commandments in the case of Buddha. They're called evolutionary, skillful and unskillful evolutionary paths. And I will try to explain that. Maybe I should explain it now. So anyway, then in this sacrifice ground, Buddha comes on page 138, no bulls were slain, no goats or sheep, no cocks and pigs, nor were various living beings subject to slaughter, nor were trees cut down for sacrificial posts, nor were grasses mown for the sacrificial grass, and those who are called slaves or servants or workmen did not perform their task for fear of blows or threats, weeping, and in tears. But those who wanted to do something did it, those who did not wish to did not. They did what they wanted to do and not what they did not want to do. The sacrifice was carried out with ghee, oil, ghee is a boiled clarified butter, oil, butter, curds, honey, and molasses. Not good enough for a vegan, but good enough compared to slaughtering a bunch of animals. Then, everybody had a great time doing it. So, but Buddha doesn't say that I'm giving you such advice. He says, that's what this ancient king did, and it was really excellent, and everybody was really happy. There were the 4 assenting groups, And King Mahavishta was endowed with 8 things, and the chaplain with 4 things and 3 modes. And this Brahmin is called the 16-fold successful sacrifice in 3 modes. And at this, the Brahmins in the audience shouted loudly and noisily, "What a splendid sacrifice, what a splendid way to perform a sacrifice." But Kuljananda sat in silence. And the Brahmins asked him why he did not applaud Ascetic Gautama's fine words. He replied, "It is not that I did not applaud them. My head would split open if I did not. But it strikes me that the ascetic Gautama does not say, 'I have heard this,' or 'it must have been like this,' but he says, 'It was like this,' or like that at the time." And so, gentlemen, it seems to me that the ascetic Gautama must have been, at that time, either King Mahavishta, the Lord of the Sacrifice, or else the Brahmin chaplain who conducted the sacrifice for him. So he's pursuing this one. Is he rebirth? Was that his former life, and he knows that it happened? Does the Reverend Gautama acknowledge that he performed the cause to be performed such a sacrifice, and that in consequence at death, after the breaking up of the body, he was reborn in the good sphere of heavenly state? I do, Brahmin. I was the Brahmin chaplain who conducted the sacrifice. And Reverend Gautama is there that the sacrifice is simpler, less difficult, more fruitful and profitable than this 3-fold sacrifice with its 16 attributes. There is Brahmin. And what is it? And then after giving that good advice and saving all those adult lives, and helping the lower people in the society, the Buddha then is not satisfied with that success, and he says, "There's another one that's even better." And then he says, "Wherever regular family gifts are given to virtuous ascetics, these constitute a sacrifice more fruitful and profitable than that." Well, why is that? He says. Well, Brahmin, no arhats, or those who have attained arhat path, will attend such a sacrifice. Why? Because they see beatings and throttling, so they do not attend. But they will attend the sacrifice in which regular family gifts are given to virtuous ascetics, because there are no beatings or throttlings there. That is why this kind of sacrifice is more fruitful and profitable. Is there something even better? He says, yes. And then giving shelter to the Sangha, that is the mendicant community, coming from 4 quarters, that's a more profitable sacrifice. And then is there something better than that? He says, yes, there is. If anyone with a pure heart goes to refuge to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, that's becoming a Buddhist, in other words, and what they called, they didn't say becoming a Buddhist in the ancient times. They called it becoming an insider. And by insider, they meant entered into the refuge of the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. And what they meant by entered into the refuge of that meant they moved from the ordinary social community into this other social community within a community, which was a community of people who were seeking nibbana, seeking education, actually, seeking general spiritual education, not simply learning the profession of being a priest, or the profession of being a warrior, or the profession of being a merchant, but actually liberalizing and liberating their mind. That they become insiders. But then there's something better than that, though. He says, yes, there is. Then he says, if, Brahman, anyone with a pure heart undertakes the precepts to refrain from taking life, from taking what is not given, from sexual immorality, from lying speech, and from taking strong drink and sloth-producing drugs, that constitutes a sacrifice more profitable than any of these 4. So in other words, not only join the refuge, but actually practice the practices. And here he only gives the 5, what are called the 5 laypersons' ethical precepts. Panchashila, they call them. Still, they have that in modern India, where they don't have formal Buddhism, but they still have these 5 shilas, they call them, 5 ethical precepts. And there's still something better than that. What is that? Brahman, a Tathagata arises in this world, an arhat, and here he's reciting his own titles. An arhat, fully like Buddha, endowed with wisdom and conduct, a blissful one, a knower of the worlds, a trainer of humans to be trained, or a tamer of human tamer, teacher of gods and humans, enlightened and blessed. He, having realized by his proclaims this world with his devas, maras, and brahmas, his princes and people. He teaches the Dhamma, which is love in the beginning, in the middle, and the ending, and the spirit, and the letter, and displays the fully perfected and purified holy life. And then again, notice quotes from Sutra number 2, all the way up to that pond, where you're in the clear pond looking and seeing all the little shells and all the things, Nirvana, which is Nirvana. Somehow Nirvana is sitting by a pond in the mountains and looking at a clear pond, seeing the pebbles at the bottom. It's not disappearing from the universe. It's just sitting calmly at the side of the pond. It's kind of cute, I think. So then they're all happy about that. So that's a very, why I said it was a Confucius thing. Confucius could not found a group of ascetics or mendicants because there was not enough wealth in China in those days. And the kings and the dukes, the petty kings and the overall sort of nominal emperor, Zhou Dynasty emperor, they would not tolerate or accept such people. And so Confucius didn't really have a big enrollment, let's say. He didn't have tenure. So, but what he did was he collected histories of ancient emperors who did a much better job than the current ones and tried to inspire like that. And some of his followers were pretty gutsy. And there is a tradition of speaking truth to power. But in the Chinese version of that, the minister would get up and stand on a platform over a big cauldron of boiling oil. And he would say, this was called remonstration to the emperor. Then he would, to show his loyalty, he would say, if you tell me, your majesty, I will jump into this boiling oil because I'm not being completely loyal because I have something critical to say. And that is, don't make war on this person, don't do that, don't execute so-and-so, whatever it was. In Chinese history, that was the idea, Confucian ideal, that you would speak truth to power. And for example, this one, one of my favorites is the story of Mencius, who was one of Confucius' most liberal followers, who I like very much, my favorite of them all. And the Duke of Lu, I think, I forget which Duke, asked him, said, well, Mencius, you're supposed to be a scholar and a smart guy, you're like a Brahmin, a Chinese Brahmin. And there's this terrible king next door, and he really sucks. The Duke in the next kingdom. And his people hate him. And he's managing very badly, and he's corrupt, and he's no good. And I think I should go and liberate them from him. What do you think? And so then Mencius says, well, your majesty, that could be a good idea, and here's the test. You march your troops to the frontier, and you tell the subjects of that bad king that you're going to come in and relieve them of the king. And if those subjects lead you in and hand the king over to you, by all means go replace him, because that means they really don't like him. If, on the other hand, they arm themselves with pitchforks and staves and spears and swords and whatever, and they say, get the hell out of our country. He may have his problems, our king, but he's our king, and get out. Then it's not a good idea, and it's just an excuse for invasion and conquest. And it's fake, in other words. And that's taking your life in your hands in those days to those rulers, So Confucius, the way he would do it, he would never challenge. And in a way, Buddha is not challenging that Brahmin thing about the goats and everything. He just tells a story that in the previous time, someone did it and followed the advice of someone, and they didn't kill all the animals, and then it was much better. And so then the guy, oh, I'll do like that. And that's how Confucius tried to deal with it. Like he had one brilliant thing, I think, of one of his things, where he says to one of his local duke, your majesty, if you wanted a new suit of clothes, how would you figure out who's going to make this suit of clothes for you? And the guy says, well, of course, I'd find the best tailor in the kingdom to sew that thing. Well, okay, but when you give up the throne, you're going to give your throne to that brat of yours, who is like not really going to be he's not the best person at all. And why don't you make a contest to find out who would be the best emperor, who has the qualities and qualifications to be the best emperor? You should do like the Electoral College is supposed to do. Foresee in case some unsuitable person, some mentally deficient person were to become a ruler, you would exclude that person for being unqualified. And you should do that. And in fact, the Emperor Yao and Shun, and I think I forget the names, but in the Book of Histories, he talks about how the emperor went and found the most filial, dutiful son who was taking care of his parents and massaging their feet every night. And they were 90 and he was 70, and all he'd done was be a good son forever. And he gave the kingdom to him. He was a commoner. He wasn't a royal clan, but he was the best person. So then he became, and then he had a wonderful reign and all this, But it's stories like that. So the Confucians did that. They didn't try to go head on. into the more authoritarian culture and the more poor kingdoms in China to challenge the way the dukes were arbitrarily using their powers. But the Buddha, so he would tell history, and then some of them presumably would be inspired and follow that history. And then later, and then actually China was unified by someone who didn't follow Confucius' thing, was a vicious person, and they pulled it all together by violence. But then his dynasty didn't last. He said it would be 10,000-year dynasty, but it lasted 30 years or 25. And then they took over and had a new good dynasty, and they brought back Confucius' idealism, and then it became good. Then they were really happy. So the Buddha's doing, it's just total axial age stuff of getting the rulers, you know, who are going on these old feudal type, tribal type of ethics of the almighty power of the ruler, and getting them to be sensible and realistic, which is what is in that book that you read, an Arnold Toynbee's view. And Buddha just had more success than Confucius, or Zoroaster, or Isaiah, or Socrates, because the kings in India could afford it. They could afford the food surplus to feed the mendicants. They didn't have, had very strong armies to repel the Persians, you know, who were their only main threat. And so they were pretty cool about it. So then that was that one. Then 15, what was the next one? I like this one. Sorry, where is it? And that's good. I didn't have you read 13, but it's good if you could read 13. You'll like it. The way that Brahma, how he challenges Maharidana. I guess I want to do that. Yeah, one subject I wanted to address. With the 5 ascetics, where he gives the first turning of the 4 noble truths, the Buddha, he says the root in the truth of origination, he uses craving as the source of suffering. And then the number of the times he does it, he goes on with craving. But his main analysis of causation is these 12 links of dependent origination, as I hope they're calling it. I call it relativistic origination. And in those 12, that's the sort of the source, you know. So the craving is actually at a superficial level. If you remember the 12 links, there are 12 of them, and they're worthy of sort of figuring them out and remembering them. And you know, you're starting at the end. Number 12 is old age and death. And 11 is birth. And 10 is usually translated as existence, but it means the sense of a being that they exist as separate from the world around them, in a way, actually. And then 9, I think, grasping, and 8 is craving, and 7 is feeling or sensation, and 6, I think, is contact, and 5 is the 6th sense field, which includes the sense objects, and 4 is name and form, or subject and object, in other words, the differentiation of the world into subjectivity and objectivity. And 3 is, what is it? Let's see, 2, 1. I got 1, it's ignorance. And 2 are karmic formations. Oh yeah, I know 3 is consciousness. Karmic formations, evolutionary formations, or volitional formation, I think. The people have different terms for it. And 3 is consciousness, that's it. So when he gives the first teaching, and when he generally talks to mendicants, he starts here, you know, as the source of suffering, which is, of course, a source. It leads to it comes from contact and sensation. and you want pleasant sensations, so you crave more pleasant ones, and you don't want unpleasant ones, so you crave getting away from that. And then you grasp, and then you feel you exist, and then you are born, and then you have old age and death. But the deeper analysis of the second noble truth is this 12 links. And one of you in the postings asked, how would someone, since instruction is such a big part of the Buddha's teaching and the movement, how would someone who didn't meet the Buddha manage to develop in this way? And they say that there's something called a Pratyeka Buddha, what I translate as a hermit Buddha. Other people have other ways of translating it. A self-Buddha, they call it, all things like that. And those are people who become enlightened without meeting a Buddha, rare people. But what they do is they know this 12, they discover these 12 links, which is usually presented in the form of a wheel, with 12 spokes. And they discover these 12 links, and basically this is the real, because this is the target of the thing that achieves liberation, which is wisdom. Wisdom and the ignorance is actually the misknowledge. It's an active not knowing. I like this term. It actually is in the dictionary, this term. We don't really use that term much, but it's my favorite term for it. It's called misknowledge, like misunderstanding, a misperception. We use the mis with it with those words. We don't really use it with knowledge, but it is in the Oxford Dictionary. Misknowledge. So because we think we know, like I know I'm different from the rest of the world. I know that I have a fixed identity, I'm always Bob, etc. And all my different levels of identification. That's the root of the whole thing. And wisdom of selflessness just means that those things that I know are actually wrong. And it doesn't mean that I don't exist. It just means I exist in a different way than I think I exist. That's the key thing. Okay? And this special misknowledge, which can also be called atmagraha in Sanskrit, attagraha in Pali. Graha means grasping or holding or a habit, and atma means self. So it means like a self-habit, or I like to say identity habit. And by the way, all of these things, racism, sexism, nationalism, religious fanaticism, all of those things are speciesism. They're all based on this original atmagraha. In other words, I'm really me, I'm really human, I'm really male, I'm really blotchy pink, which is my preferred term for white. I'm really whatever, All of those things, that original I'm really me is it. And because some of you write, I notice in a lot of things, there is no such thing as the I. Of course there's the I. I mean, this I, Sure, it's a pronoun. And that's a very important I. You have to organize yourself. You're responsible for yourself. You interact in a positive way. You choose to not kill and to save life. You choose to not steal and to give gifts. This tenfold path that I should have done maybe, but I'll do that another time. And then you need the I, the pronoun. Nobody's destroying the pronoun. But the sense that the referent of the pronoun is the fixed absolute thing. That you're, not just that you're there, but that you're absolutely there. That's the exaggeration that is the source of the suffering. And that is the misknowledge. This one. That's the misknowledge. And in a way, all social systems, without needing Buddhism, like the Dalai Lama recently said brilliantly, Dharma does not belong to Buddhism. Because he was annoyed some Buddhist teacher had made a disgrace and a scandal by behaving badly. And he said, people don't need that sort of thing. They don't need to be Buddhists with people like that. Dharma, he meant by Dharma, truth, teaching, liberation, reality, doesn't belong to Buddhism. It's correct. And, love thy neighbor as thyself, who gives himself for my sake. Jesus is teaching the same thing. Controlling the selfishness, basically. How to do it. Of course, very few have psychologies that say not only controlling, but also transcending it, where you don't actually feel selfish. Or as Buddha, as Dalai Lama also likes to say, you are a wise selfish. That's not a thing. It's an ungrammatical thing he says. If you want to be successfully selfish, be a wise selfish, and figure out how to achieve the happiness that the selfish person wants. By being selfish, you're going to achieve misery all the time. because you'll never have enough, whatever it is. And then that builds up to this craving and grasping stuff, you know. All that leads to birth, old age, and death, but none of which are fun. And so being a wise selfish means don't worry about what you want and what you have, and be of help to others. And forget about what you're getting out of it. And then that gives you a sense of being more than yourself. That is a transcendence of the Atmagraha. And then as he says, and the person who comes up with the idea that the way to be is to be altruistic in life, altruism, that person is the one, you know, you say, okay, I'm going to really be altruistic. But meaning help others be, you know, free of suffering, be happy, you know, improve things. But I don't necessarily, by thinking that, improve anything for anybody except myself. I then feel happier. So when you focus on what you can do for the world, you feel better. When you focus on what you're doing for yourself, you're not always never satisfied. And at least you may not be satisfied in what you've done for the world, but you're not worrying about how satisfied you are, and that already is a relief. Is the psychological sort of idea. And the idea of the basic Buddha's basic whole idea here, overcoming this, and central in all of these things, the light of wisdom, you know, in Bhikkhu Bodhi's book, you know, the words, Buddha's words, the central idea is to investigate yourself and discover that there is no such fixed thing inside yourself, and that you are a nexus of relations, actually, and then start to look more outward into managing these relations. And the other thing I just want to say, just a little self-congratulatorily, Max Weber, who is like the, you know, he's like the John the Baptist of religious studies academics in the West, anyway, and in modern universities, sociology and so forth, Max Weber. He said that Buddhism was socially apathetic, his famous term, and that the Buddhist notion of reality was what he called otherworldly mysticism, and otherworldly asceticism and otherworldly mysticism, meaning, and he proclaimed, with the knowledge that he had in the early 20th century in Europe, that Buddhism had no impact on society whatsoever, because people who became Buddhists in Asia, they just dropped out and they just didn't do anything, and they just lived in a monastery. Of course, he was living in Protestant Germany when he thought that, and Protestants in general think monks and nuns are useless. You know, that's part of no free lunch. You know, that's the Protestant ethic. So, and therefore everybody agreed with that. But actually, you can see, looking in that sutra, to challenge the caste system, to challenge the Vedic sacrifice, to say that the Vedas are not the body of God and the Word of God, but they are made by humans relating to certain kind of power structures and certain people's ideas, and to, in that way, stand up speaking truth to power, to even refuse to follow your father's order to be the king, or your wife's entreaties, or all the priests and all the authorities in your society, and go off and say, I'm going to find out what life is for and why I'm alive and what everyone's alive for. And all of that had immense social impact, is what I'm trying to say. And even so far as my main thesis in Inner Revolution, as you will discover, which actually will be appreciated probably posthumously by my colleagues, the Protestant thing is mostly dominant in American religious studies. And therefore, an insight that Europe's throwing off of monasticism through the Reformation was actually the source of the European militarism that led to the planetary conquest and many genocides, and maybe there's some drawbacks to the marvelous, wonderful reformational thing that they think is like all. They nod at the reasoning in academic meetings over my many years of talking to them. And then they totally forget what you said, like half an hour later when you're having a glass of sherry with them. Because it can't be, because that's the part of Luther and Calvin, you know. Meanwhile, Calvin is certifiable, completely correct. You know, you're born and you're chosen to be saved or not ahead of being born, and nothing you do makes any difference, except therefore you work in a factory all day long, doesn't matter. If you become the owner of the factory, you build a church and you have some hope. But even then, it's like a totally depressing thing. And yet it's an unqualified good, the people who argue about what, you know, a great industrial business is, you know. Which meanwhile, great industrial business we now are seeing has its drawbacks, such as it will be destroying this planet within the next couple of decades, if not restrained by people who seem incapable of exercising the responsibility to restrain what industrialization is doing to us and the whole planet and all of our future generations that we make such a fuss about our kids and grandkids and things like that. So therefore, but I'm just aggrandizing myself a little bit, I'm sorry, but I did make the breakthrough about the social impact of the Buddha's movement in every society where it went. It's huge. And I say this in that book, but to underline it, militarism, if militarism is a major problem, it could have been a benefit in some times in the past to defend yourself against some barbarians, but if now it's a major danger to the planet, it's the other one, you know, the climate disruption, the nature disruption is one, and the potential wars, world war is another. Those are the two biggest ones. And if that's a problem, then one Columbia sociologist said to a crowd of young people around the time of the nuclear freeze thing, I think that's like almost 45 years ago, he said that it's great you guys are protesting the war and all these wars and the nuclear build-ups and all this kind of thing. But, you know, Cold War and huge expense of that and danger of that, and wonderful. And the people in the war industries will, maybe you surround the Pentagon, you surround the, you know, Rockwell, Grumman or something, factories, and they'll stay home, they'll take a break, they'll have a vacation day. And then you go home, because you guys are amateurs, and you go home, because there is no peace job. There's only war jobs. There's a few NGOs, but there's basically nothing like a peace industry with paid people who are professional peaceniks. It's not possible. There is no such thing. So what are you guys going to do next, you know, type of thing. He gave this speech, and I was like, you're right, you know. And I, the ex-monk, you know, who was into everybody's a layman type of attitude at that time, I was like, oh. And then I'm looking around in history. Where is it? Where's the institution that could possibly stand up against the war, a war government, you know? A Kshatriya-ruled government, you know, like America. Take, for example, America. Well, it's not the family. A little family can't do it. They'll come and say, "I'll shoot your kids," you know. I want them all. I'm reestablishing the draft, you know. And then the poor householder can't do anything. So family can't stop it. The mother will say, "I don't want my son to be killed. I don't want my daughters to be killed. I don't want my husband to be killed," but they won't listen to her. So monks and nuns in history, here and there, in this and that society, they don't have the children. They're like life and death struggle to destroy the inner enemy of their ego habit. Not the ego itself, the ego habit, the ego exaggeration. And they're ready to put their life on the line for that. They're like a military cadre. Remember, Buddha would have been a military leader had he stayed in the household. He would have been a king and a general of troops. So he formed a militant, anti-military, anti-violence society within the society. And then in some part, and then people say, when you make that argument, they say, well, but then the monks went on the Crusades, and the Friar Tuck, you know, joined Robin Hood and beat people over the head with the leg of lamb that he didn't eat, the one out of 4 legs that he didn't eat himself. And so that's ridiculous, and monks are just like everybody else, and they're bad and frustrated, and they don't exercise their own conscience, and they don't have any sex. So therefore, they're really not live with our post-Freudian attitudes. And they have no idea of sublimation. But they say that. But, and that's true, there's co-optation in different parts of history. But, you know, you have your warrior monks. But actually, if you look in different societies where monasticism became a huge thing, the militarism decreased. And then occasionally the king wanted to do something, then they would go and they would bust some monks and say, you're not good monks. you're not really meditating, you're just getting fat. So you come out and I'm going to graft you into my army. And that happened. But basically, it creates a wave in a society that's an institution that can stand against a kind of Pentagon type of institution. And it's the only one, actually. If you look in history, there's no other one. So inventing it was hard. And who ever had one? Hindus didn't have them until the Buddhist thing was more or less destroyed in India. Then they started being celibate swamis. Muslims don't have them. Jews don't have them. They have a few mystics, but Sufis, but not celibate. And the celibacy is key to it. Because then you're not saddled with a family. Then you can be macho for peace, like soldiers are macho for war. And that's the only way. That's an interesting thing. So anyway, all as imperfect as it was, that impact on society, that is the way to study Buddhism, is to look at its social impact as well as its. And this is a good preface to next week, where we begin to focus on the Vinaya and the Sangha, the community. Okay? Bye. Have a nice weekend.